mga kaibigan at makinig kayo.
Hi Philippines Night, what's going on? Roland Navarro here. I am excited because you have arrived to the Cliff Notes versions of Philippine history and culture. I will be spending an average of 1.5 minutes for every 100 years of history. So please bear with me and buckle your seatbelts. Alright, this is a beautiful tropical country with over 7,000 islands. To put that into perspective, Hawaii has 8 islands. The Philippines is like 900 Hawaiis. Why would you want to miss out on that? Diversity is great, the food is awesome, so how did the Philippines, this beautiful country, become known as a place where millions of people are starving, sick, and living in poverty? I will be sharing with you 5 things that occurred in the Philippines that have had a major impact on the country to the present day. Let's start with number 1. The Philippines is an archipelago. What's an archipelago? It's a group of islands, like Hawaii. The Philippines, because it is spread out over thousands of islands, did not have one unified kingdom that ruled over all these islands. The largest group, the Tagalogs, make up only 28% of the population. So there's a lot of diversity going on here. If you think governing 50 United States is hard, imagine how hard it is to govern 7,000 islands. With over 90 million people spread out over these islands, there are a lot of difficulties that occur in terms of building a united people. Which brings us to point number 2, Spain. Spain ruled the Philippines for over 330 years. The Spanish Empire had discovered the Philippines before it was called the Philippines. Actually, that's where the name came from, because we were all named after King Philip. Philip, Philippines. Spain, for the first time ever in colonial policy, did not teach the Philippines how to speak Spanish. This is huge! Huge! I mean, think about it. Mexico and Latin and South America have a shared cultural identity simply because they could speak Spanish to each other. Because the Philippines did not speak one unified language, there were specific consequences. To this very day, in 2011, the Philippines speaks 171 different languages. So even though Tagalog is the national language, there are 8 officially recognized languages in the Philippines. How can a people be united with so many different languages? So that's why the Filipino people are starving for anything that points to cultural unity. That's why Manny Pacquiao is so popular. That's why the country shuts down every time he fights. Because it is one of the few times that every Filipino can relate to each other while the rest of the world is watching. For example, look at this group of young Filipinos. You would think that they're watching the World Cup, or the Super Bowl, or even the Lakers winning the 3rd championship in a row. But no, they are watching the Miss Universe pageant, and they are anxiously waiting to see if Miss Philippines will be voted into the finals. Let's tune in now.
Ready, and the top 15 is for the Philippines.
Okay, so where were we? Yes, Spain. So, in addition to not uniting the country under one language, the Philippines was thousands and thousands of miles away from Spain and did not have a lot of gold and silver. So because of this, a lot of Spaniards did not immigrate and leave Spain for the Philippines. So if not speaking Spanish is a huge implication, then this is even more huge. In other places like Mexico, the much larger numbers of Spanish people who live there, intermixed with the local indigenous people and created a mestizo or mixed class of people. These mestizos in the southern parts of the Americas formed a politically important middle class. Let me repeat, middle class, that became the dominant class for countries like Mexico, El Salvador, and Peru. In the Philippines, however, because there were so few Spanish and Chinese settlers, the mestizo class did not form an important middle class. These mestizos instead became the wealthy elite, and as a result, you create a culture with a powerful, rich, and wealthy few, no middle class, and over 97% of the people in the lower classes. The one unifying legacy that Spain did leave behind, however, was the successful conversion of over 90% of the population to the Christian faith. It is in this regard that for the first time, these Filipinos had something that they could all relate to each other. This brings us to point number 3. The United States. After Spain lost a war to the U.S. in 1898, America ruled the Philippines for almost 50 years. English became an official language because Americans thought it was too hard to have so many different languages. As a direct consequence, the Philippines became the 5th largest population of English speakers in the world, with more English speakers than Canada and Australia combined. This is a main reason why the Philippines has become a world leader in offshore customer service call center jobs. So one of the most significant impacts of American involvement in the Philippines is its strategic military importance. It's right next to upcoming rivals like Japan and China, and in fact, the 2 largest U.S. overseas bases in the world, Clark Air Force Base and Subic Naval Base, were both in the Philippines. So this brings us to point number 4, World War II. And unfortunately, the Philippines' important military position for the United States led to the country's utter destruction during the war. Let me show you some footage of Manila prior to the war. It was considered the Pearl of the Orient, the Barcelona of Asia, a thriving metropolis of commerce, arts, and architecture. But after the war, the country was ruined. Every coconut and sugar mill was destroyed. Concrete highways and roads were demolished. All the railroads were destroyed. Countless government buildings, universities, colleges, monasteries, and churches, and the treasures inside were ruined. The cultural legacies of art, literature, and architecture of the Orient's first truly international melting pot, the mix of Spanish, American, and Asian cultures, was destroyed. Hundreds of years of cultural identity was wiped out. Conveniently, the U.S. granted the Philippines its independence in 1946, right after the war was over and after the country was destroyed. In return, Americans would have equal rights with Filipino citizens to develop and exploit natural resources of the Philippines. So in this case, the poorer got poorer. In addition, the U.S. kept Clark Air Force Base and Subic Naval Base, where very large red light districts emerged even after the bases were closed, where sex trafficking has become a very large problem. Which brings us to the present. Point number 5. What happens when you give a divided country its independence right after it was destroyed? A people who are inherently divided by language and geography, with a society of a few rich, no middle class, and many poor people. You have rampant corruption, industry is lacking, high debt, and natural resources to foreigners that could be used for its own people. More poverty, more sickness, and a lack of education. So now what? These 5 specific events bring us to the 5 global giants that Pastor Rick has shared as the biggest needs affecting every nation all over the world. So you can look at it at one of 2 ways. It's a crazy mess of a situation or a huge opportunity. Because despite everything that has happened to the Filipino people, there is still a happy spirit inside us. That despite all the suffering, the Filipino people remain as one of the most friendliest in the world. The reputation for Filipino hospitality is known the world over. I mean, dude, look at this. This is a maximum security prison in the Philippines. This is a prison full of murderers, thieves, criminals to the highest degrees. And they are practicing a dance routine for Michael Jackson's Thriller. Here at Saddleback, I have learned that nothing is impossible. That we are all here, sitting and gathering at this very moment for such a time as this. That we have an opportunity as ordinary people, empowered by a loving God, that we can make a difference together wherever we go. And with that, I introduce you to the peace plan.
What are the global giants in the world? What are the problems that affect billions of people, not millions? Spiritual emptiness, self-centered leadership, poverty, disease, illiteracy. There aren't enough doctors to solve all the issues in the world. There aren't enough teachers to solve all the issues in the world, and there aren't enough missionaries to solve all the issues in the world. But there is an army of believers sitting in churches waiting to be mobilized. What are the antidotes to these 5 global giants? Plant churches, equip leaders, assist the poor, care for the sick, and educate the next generation. Peace is a grassroots, church-to-church strategy. Your church hooks up with another church overseas, and that church overseas hooks up with another church in another country. Every church is a sending and receiving church. It's a lay movement designed to mobilize average church members to do normal tasks that can make a difference in the world. The greatest need in the 21st century is to release the pent-up, latent power of the average believer in churches local around the world. If we can figure out a way to turn an audience into an army, to turn consumers into contributors, to turn spectators into participators, it will change the world. It's time to stop debating and start doing. It's time for the church to be known for love, not for legalism, for what we're for, not for what we're against. It's time for the church to be the church.